All right. We are doing our usual Saturday stream. This is coming off the heels of my unpopular color video that I did about the racial bias that people have when it comes to dating, which not even just dating, but just like romantic things in general, like we were discussing with hookers and how a lot of people like to ignore this isn't happening so they can keep peddling their if you just try hard enough narrative. And I'm proud of the video because I think we showed proof and evidence of the discriminatory ways in which people act towards someone on the basis of what they look like. And when I say what they look like, I mean in a way the way in which they cannot control their appearance, they will go after you for that. So um, I'm glad we made it. But it's kind of interesting when you live in a society that tells you about the sanctity and greatness of chicks. A lot of times people really do pretend as if like it's either like this, you either get these people who are making all these nasty comments about your ethnicity, like the ones I showed in the video, or you have people who genuinely pretend like it doesn't exist or like it's not there. Like they actually try to convince you that you're in some type of post-racial society where you can get any woman you want and they're all so excited. And it's total BS. So I'm glad we did the video and I'm glad that I was able to give the examples that I did. Yeah, I mentioned a while ago that my brother is like a really big Michael Jackson fan, and there was some documentary we were watching where we were there was a clip of him with Jesse Jackson, and I asked my brother, "Do you know who that is?" And he said no, and I put my hand over my face and I was like, because I've really been getting more into this thing of I call it objective importance, where even if you don't like someone or anything like that, you still can acknowledge their importance as an individual. And I said, well, it's really sad when you consider that um, Jackson was the first African American to launch a national presidential campaign. I always have to say national because Shirley Chisholm ran in '72. Um, that's someone who does matter. He's the father of the now disgraced Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. So I guess that's just like a running gag where if you're even if you do something significant, unless you're like the same, what is it, 4 or 5 people that get talked about every day, you pretty much just get ignored by large segments of your own population. I mean, Jackson's been around for what is it, 40 years? Since the 80s, 70s? I guess, I know he was in the civil rights movement as well, but it's like, I don't know how he doesn't know who that is. And I always like have to explain to people that, it's like even if you don't watch the news, you know who Martin Luther King is. You know who that is because in these schools they mention him, in these history books they mention him, albeit they omit certain stuff. But at the very least, they give some acknowledgement that makes it to where even people that don't look him up know who that is. Which is why it drives me crazy that all of these other people who were either affiliated with him or did things that were important as well, pretty much get completely ignored. I remember last night I was actually watching this. It was this. I don't know when it was made. Could have been the last 10 years, but the South Carolina Hall of Fame inducted Benjamin Mays, and it was a very incredible film. They were talking about he was the son of two former slaves who came up in South Carolina. He was president of Morehouse College for 27 years, and during that time was a mentor to Martin Luther King and to Julian Bond and all these other people. That he was actually a noted public speaker who came to the White House, and you see pictures of him with Kennedy and Johnson and apparently Carter as well. In fact, there's another video. It wasn't that same video, but there's some video where it's like it's Carter visiting him like in his later years, like at his house. And I was like, that's a really significant figure that I almost like when I was a kid didn't hear anything about. I had to go and look him up myself. And I think something's wrong with that. where you have all of these different black people. We're just gonna you mention race again, who did important things that you hear almost nothing about. And yeah, they might have one, two, three books, about them, and maybe they'll have some stuff named after them. But the thing about having things named after you is that while you can consider it an honor, and it is, the problem is that a lot of times, and you'll be very surprised, people can go to a building or a place named after someone for years and have no idea who that is. Um, like you have plenty of people who go to the what school is that? I'm not going to mention these specifically, but there are buildings named after people, and a lot that go there don't actually say, "Hey, who is this named after? What did they do?" Never crosses their mind. They just show up and go in there and do what they have to do and then leave. And it's I don't know. I just think something's so sad when you name something after a person and no one ever questions like what did this individual do that was of such noteworthiness as to. I mean, not everybody has something named after them, so that would pretty much automatically indicate that there's something about them that was important, and you see nothing as far as like people actually explaining it. So it's sad. But like I said, I guess if there are plenty of white people that throughout history did important things that we don't talk about, it makes sense that we also ignore plenty of black people that did important things. It's two for two. It makes a lot of sense. Like if we treat white people who did important things like they didn't exist or don't matter, we can do the same thing with blacks, and we do. Pretty much out of the civil rights movement, the only figures you see heavily discussed to where they're getting like books every couple of years and movies and like actual discussions in colleges, just courses about them, are probably just King and Malcolm X. And even then, Malcolm is much lesser talked about because his views are not as what's going to put it marketable as King. We'll put it that way. Like it's gotten to a point where I really, outside of Farrakhan himself, I really don't see anyone ever talk about Elijah Muhammad, which is very sad considering how long he was leader of the Nation of Islam. And you see the same thing where I even was having this discussion with somebody, and I said Farrakhan has all of these young guys that follow under him, and I'm thinking to myself, you can't get one of them to write a book about him, like. So if when he eventually passes, and I'm not saying anything about wishing death on anybody, but just when he eventually passes, it's going to take some journalist or some person who didn't even know him to, I guess, construct a novel about him instead of people that were actually under him, who can give you insights that some outsider might not have. Well, and then we also were watching this clip of some local coverage of when Abernathy passed away, and I've always been so disgusted by his treatment. It's like this was King's number two guy, his best friend, his closest friend, the one that took over the Southern Christian Leadership Conference after he passed. And it's like you hear almost nothing about him to any extent. It's just it's sad, like. I'd say the same thing about A. Philip Randolph. Like you had this early labor leader who at one point was called the most dangerous Negro in America, which by default should show how important he was. Who actually threatened to march on Washington? Was that back in the 40s when FDR was president? It got stopped because they actually met him halfway on what he wanted. Um, and you just hear nothing because I'm really into labor. Just labor history, and he's part of two important movements: the labor movement and the civil rights movement. I just think someone like that should have more discussion about him. Yeah, it's him, Roy Wilkins, James Farmer, like all these other people that did important stuff during the civil rights movement, just almost never discussed or brought up by black people. If I see them get mentioned, it's usually by some historian, or maybe they'll show up in some movie about King for 5 seconds. But I don't know. I just thought it was so sad that like we can go down the list and you can name important things that they did. Um, because again, we're of the opinion that they did important things, but are not as discussed as they should be. And then like people go, "Wow, I had no idea." But I guess it's twofold. If you choose to not look this stuff up, I guess it makes sense why you would have no idea about most of it. Like even with King, I was having this conversation a few days ago. It's like I know children who literally can only tell you that he gave the "I Have a Dream" speech and he was assassinated. And I was explaining how pathetic that was when you consider that he has one of the most well documented lives of the 20th century by nature of how many books been written on him. And it's like, you know, there are multiple things about him that I would argue are just as important as those two other events. I mean, here's an individual who was the youngest person to ever win the Nobel Peace Prize, was surveilled by the FBI for the last 5 years of his life, who opposed Vietnam and actually really ruined his relationship with Johnson after doing that. So it's sad. It's just really pathetic the like how few of the people who actually mattered get covered. And then the one that gets covered the most and people like know of the most still know the least about him as possible. Like imagine if your whole life you become a celebrity and people only can name two things about you over and over again. One speech and your death. That's sad. Oh man, I guess this is the lot of African Americans in history. If they weren't King or Douglas, they just pretty much get completely ignored. If you're not King or Malcolm X or Obama or Frederick Douglass, you did something important in African American history, you pretty much just get totally neglected and not discussed or not talked about or anything. Just whatever. Oh man. So it's really sad. I don't even know how you avert it because it's like you tell one person about him and then that's it. That person probably forgets it like 5 seconds later. It just seems like if these individuals don't get like a movie about them or like documentaries or some kind of visual thing, a lot of information gets glossed over and not discussed. Because I was just looking up some stuff with Benjamin Mays, and it's like he has his autobiography, and then I think he has two books written about him, and I was like, see, a guy who was that important for and did all that stuff should have more things about him than just a handful of books, and some of them don't even get that. Like I think Whitney Young has one book on him, but even then, it's like, man, you would think with all these historians running around the place, they'd be able to, discuss more and more people. But I saw the same thing where there was a guy that wrote a book on Taft, and they asked him why did he do it, and he said it's because he kept seeing all these books on Roosevelt and Wilson, and he decided that he should have one as well. Oh, yeah, people get ignored when they're alive, and they get ignored after they die too. I like how everybody will always say, "Oh, you're so negative." You're just like, I'm just going off of what is there. Like if I see someone who I can objectively look at and say, "Hey, this person did important things," and then I feel like they're being not as well treated as far as remembrance as they should be, then yeah, I'm gonna say that's wrong. I felt Arthur Lee of the band Love was ignored throughout his life and could have been covered much more. Well, he can join the long list of, of people that should have been covered more that weren't. I remember that one argument I had with my best friend where he was like trying to justify not knowing who actors are and talking about he treats them like regular people and some stupid crap. And I even told him to his face that that was stupid because I'm not. I don't pretend if someone says something insane that it's normal just to get along with them. But it really does feel like people have a vested interest in just like completely ignoring others to such an extent that you almost think they're doing it on purpose. Because I've said before that I don't have any special powers. I don't have any kind of like information that is only accessible to me. So anything I know, someone else can just look it up online as well. Um, but they don't even try. Like they just I'm telling you, when I was a kid, and I remember I got my first computer when I was in the fourth grade, my first laptop. I was actually curious about stuff. I would look up like, hey, who did this? Who did that? Like I didn't just sit there and, oh, I guess all of this just came to be because the civil rights movement was one person that we hear about nonstop. Like I just think something about that is so pathetic. Like you have all these people that were involved with that, and they're just nowhere near as discussed. And they almost and some of them get almost no attention at all, like they didn't even exist. And I just think something is fundamentally wrong with living in a society where people are okay with treating those that actually did things that mattered like crap. I went down Wikipedia rabbit hole link jumping from entry to entry about people back in the 1800s to 1900s. I'm glad you brought up WikiPiss. They were begging me for money a few days ago on Wednesday. If we've given you $2.75 of knowledge, can you please give us something in return? We really don't want to run ads. God, they are like out of all the websites I go to, in terms of the site itself, not like people on there, they're probably the most obnoxious one because like I can go on Instagram or YouTube or any other, and they don't beg me for money. They don't say, hello, person who is infinitely less wealthy than the guy who made this site, please donate to us so that we can keep our doors open, even though whether you donate to us or not, it doesn't matter because we're just going to still be around anyway. But it's such a joke. Like they really pretend they're on their last leg, and if you don't give them something, they're screwed. It's just God, I hate that site. They're the only website I use regularly that begs me for money. Nowhere else does that. Please consider donating. How about you guys consider running some ads so you don't have to beg people for money every time they come on your stupid site? Because whether you donate or not, they're never going to be gotten rid of or deleted. So like it's such a fake cry for help. Like, hello, person who has no impact whatsoever on whether we're allowed to continue or not. Please consider donating to pretend that you're more important than you actually are. I'm not giving them one red cent. Oh, oh. Mm. I remember that there was this one guy that came on my stream and he was trying to claim, and when people make claims on here, for some reason, I'm the only one who can ever show proof. He tried to say that most women want kids, which I think is complete BS. Because every time I tell one of them, "Hey, would you like to have a family?" they say no. Like some like long term goal. Would you like to do this? They always, almost every time, say they're not interested in that. And every time I see a kid born in real life, it's usually on accident. The two parents were too stupid to wear protection, so they created a life they couldn't take care of. But what I thought was really interesting is that I um I was having this discussion about how the guy was trying to say that supposedly you can't have a legacy if you don't have children. I was like, you are such a complete buffoon. I mean, do we really need to sit here and spend a whole 30 minutes discussing all the important people that are well remembered who don't have children? George Washington didn't have any children, and you can go look at his face on Mount Rushmore. He's got a whole state named after him. Um, and then even the people who have kids, they're like, no one remembers King because he had four kids because they don't do anything. So it's like, what is? It was such a bizarre point to make. Like, it was really stupid. People who have left school, who have left behind their work, have more of a legacy than people that leave behind children. You can leave children behind and never be remembered. Yeah. I mean, there's literally millions of fathers and mothers that no one ever talks about. It's like, what did having a kid do to make them remembered? Nothing. Well, listen, if someone who has children has a legacy, it's not because, oh, they were this amazing because that's a prerequisite of being you're supposed to be a good parent. I can't think of anyone who is considered important or considered to have done something significant who is remembered best because, oh, they were this person's dad or mother. Like like nobody remembers Malcolm X because he had six, what was it, daughters? Like, no, not don't. In fact, you actually have a lot of biographies of him that will mention his kids for like one sentence and will just keep going on to other stuff. I mean, it's so stupid. Just like with Farrakhan, nobody knows about him because he has children. Nobody knows about Jesse Jackson because he has kids. Like it's so weird. What a like it. I'm telling you, the people who have children who are important are not remembered because they have children, and the people who don't have children but are important are remembered because having kids is not considered some essential thing to be remembered. It just isn't. So that's why that point by that guy was really stupid. We know about who we are through their talent. We know about who they we know about what we know through their talents and work. Yeah. The only thing that King is remembered for because of like what his family did is his wife is the one who led the creation of the Martin Luther King holiday. And you could argue that, if he didn't marry her, then he wouldn't have had a holiday. Um, but that's really it. Like, I guess you could also say that I've heard that they're the ones who commissioned for Taylor Branch to write his official biography, that 3-part series. But that's still like is mostly stuff having to do like I don't know anything. I'll put it like this. I couldn't name something that was done specifically by his children that wasn't done by that like people remember him for. Okay, I'll put it that way. In fact, actually, you could say that his children, and when I say his children, I'm specifically referring to his sons, have tried to use his legacy to enrich themselves. Because there was a dispute about 9 years ago where where what was it, King the Third and Dexter were trying to sell the Nobel Peace Prize and something else, and then the only living daughter, Bernice, blocked it. That's such a slimy thing to do to try to sell it, man. I'm just saying that, like, if you really think about it, he could have had no children and just been married, and you really there really would be no difference as far as like, do people remember him or not? Because his kids haven't done anything to like keep his name around. They're just kind of there. They're like whatever. I guess you like if I were to say we wouldn't have the holiday, that still could have happened because he was like a lot of his friends were around in those decades after his death. So people like Ralph Abernathy, Jesse Jackson. So theoretically, even if he weren't married, it one of them still could have proposed and done that to get him remembered. Just like Benjamin Mays, he had no children, but to this day, there are people who keep sending petitions to the White House to award him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So you don't have to have people related to you to still be known and remembered. That's why I said people are dumb. Baldwin didn't have children, and he's still remembered for his contributions. Yeah, I'm not even saying this to be funny. Having children, if you want to be a historical figure and person that's remembered for decades, is probably one of the least important things you can do. Um, because the other part of it is if you look at most significant black people in history, they are known for something they did, not someone they created. We'll put it that way. Like you King could have literally given the "I have a dream" speech and been rid of one sentence that my four little children like that could be cut out and it would still be just as good of a speech. You think I'm playing? Like when you really think about it, kids are one of the least significant things you can do, unless the kid becomes some big, huge celebrity that eclipses you. It doesn't matter. And hell, even if you have a kid that's important, you still run the chance of not being remembered yourself. Like I've seen all these articles about Trump, for example. I don't hear anyone talking about Fred. Now they talked more about him after his son became president, but you haven't seen any new biographies of him, no new movies. Like he gets mentioned here and there, but as far as like he's a good example of how you can have a kid who's important to such an extent that they just like I said, they eclipse everybody else. No one else gets mentioned. It's just so goofy to me. You think I'm playing? There are plenty of people who have a kid who's very important that like you could argue is their biggest contribution that they had this very important child and it still doesn't really matter because people don't know who they are in spite of them having this kid who's important like um just to give you an example. So Beyonce is one of the most iconic artists of the current era. Do you think a quarter of the people who listen to her music know who her mother is or her dad? Probably not. I remember I was really like annoyed or irritated with my brother because he apparently thought that the only siblings Michael had were the ones in the Jackson Five and Janet, and I was like, how do you not know that he had a huge family of technically nine siblings, while one died in infancy? It's like that's supposed to be your favorite that's supposed to be your favorite guy, and you can't even tell me how many siblings he had. Really, that's kind of disturbing when you think about it. Like you can have a kid who's very important way more than you are, and then even something like that is inclined to backfire on you, and you'll see receive no credit, no mentionings. You'll be like a footnote, like, oh yeah, you were the parent of this child of this very important person. Like, okay, you'll show up for a few pages in the book. You might appear in a movie here or there for like one scene. That's really disturbing when you think about it. Like even people who have kids that are important are not considered important themselves. So it's like if you want to do something important and you have children, no one will consider that important because everybody like it's not hard to have a kid. It's like it's just no one's getting an award for having children. Let's put it that way. And even if you have a kid who ends up being important, you're still inclined to not be remembered because the stardom of the child is to such an extent that it eclipses you and leaves you with very few remembrances or mentions yourself. Seriously, look at Fred Trump. This is a guy who created a business with his mother. And what like who do you see today mentioning him? His son was president, one of the most powerful men in the world for 4 years. And you see almost nothing about the dad. There's no book written about him, or if there is, it's like part of some other person's book. Um, there's no movie. As far as I know, there are no things named after him. So what really again, like what's the point? Even having a very important son still didn't stop him from not being remembered as he was eclipsed by his son. And then you can forget about Trump's mother. You don't hear anything about her at all. You would think Fred was like he spit Donald out with like an egg or something. It's like oh, and it came out of his mouth. What they call it, reproducing asexually, where they can like make the kid by themselves. That's what they act like. That's crazy to think about. That there's like two routes for a person who has kids to go. They either have a kid that nobody remembers because they didn't do anything remotely as important as their dad, um, or they the kid is so important that they completely eclipse the parent. Like they just it's like one way or the other. You're just not remembered. Like you either have a kid who doesn't matter, who like did nothing of any significance, or you have one that does, and then no one talks about you at all ever. That's crazy. Because I do think in 100 years, people will still talk about like out of any of the current African Americans, I think people will talk about Jesse Jackson because again, that 1984 presidential campaign is culturally significant. But I don't think they're gonna bring up his son at all because his son, like, okay, he was a congressman who wasn't really known for doing anything besides he wrote some books and then he went to jail for being crooked. So it's like I think the dad will be remembered and the son will be a footnote, which is sad because, like I said, I'm not a fan of successful black men destroying themselves over stupid stuff. But I'm just thinking I don't see where historians will be like this congressman that has no major piece of legislation to his name and went to prison in one of the most disgraceful turns of a politician in the 21st century. Yeah, uh, he was very important. I don't think that'll happen. That's just me speculating, but I'm just going off what I believe. We didn't even get to bring up Julian Bond. He was another disciple of Benjamin Mason. He came toward like the tail end of his tenure because I obviously remember he's like 10 years younger than King. Um, I guess we could say it like this: he was founder of the Southern Poverty Law Center. He was there for 10 years. He was the NAACP chairman. Um, he was in the Georgia state legislator, and I've always of any black person after like in that period of like the 70s to 2000s, I've always felt like he was the one who had the most to give and was given the least opportunity to do something with it because that 19 was that 86 race between him and Lewis for that seat in the US House of Representatives. I really wish he had won that. And I think that if Lewis hadn't have done the dirty stuff that he did by trying to accuse him of being on drugs, um he could have won, and he was the front runner initially. And I think if he had won, he would have run for senator and then maybe for president after that, or governor or something. I don't think he would have just sat on that seat for 30 years like Lewis did. I think he would have seen it as a stepping stone versus some new permanent position to have. So I've always just thought he was like screwed over because he was very smart. Like I read and I've listened to some. I actually when I was talking about doing a documentary on Bush 43, I was going to use this speech that Bond gave to the I can't remember if it was the Human Rights Council, so not the Human Rights Council, some U.S. organization, and he broke down like how the Bush administration screwed up the handling the Hurricane Katrina, and I thought it was so eloquent. So it's just really sad that people do important things and they get ignored. So we can suck off the same like two or three over and over again. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King been through hell with a lot of white people, yeah, as well as every other black person in the civil rights movement, the ones that get ignored. I mean, I wasn't even that big of a Lewis fan, and like he almost died on that bridge, and but no mention whatsoever. After his death, you hear almost nothing. Mm. Been through hell with white people, like yeah. So did every other person that was involved with that stuff. That was like a prerequisite. No, they're really interesting in just terms of who they choose to prop up and who they ignore. I remember one of my favorite anecdotes about the relationship between Mays and King is that apparently they had promised each other that whoever outlived the other would do the eulogy at the funeral of the other one. So if King outlived Mays, he would do the eulogy at his funeral, and then when vice versa. And that's a hell of a pledge to make to somebody. If you die first, you give the eulogy at my funeral. If I die first, you give like it's crazy. But yeah, he honored his commitment to him, and that's another example of how tight knit that relationship was, and you hear almost nothing about it ever. But again, I'll never believe that. And I've tried to explain this before that people choose and pick who they want to prop up as important, and they kind of just you know ignore everybody else. And even with the people they prop up as significant, they still choose to only tell certain things. Because I remember when I was a kid, I would hear about King over and over. It's like no, they never mentioned the opposition to Vietnam, and that was a purposeful thing on the part of you could call it broadcast. You could call historians are less likely to do that, but a lot of people who bring him up now, politicians especially, almost never bring up the opposition to Vietnam because we live in a pro-war country where a majority of lawmakers support some military conflict overseas any given time. And they know that propping up a historical figure that is beloved by today's society, um, with the forefront of his narrative being that he was anti-war, is antithetical to the values and belief systems that they would like to push. Um, So they'll go, yeah, we agree that people should be treated equally, and then they hear the part where he's against Vietnam. Oh, well, let's pretend that didn't happen. Let's put that to the backside, to the back burner. They think they're slick, but the problem is since most people don't read books where this stuff is mostly inclined to be discussed and talked about in a way that's factual. because I said before, journalists in print media are less likely to hide things and sensationalize stuff than people on TV who are trying to get ratings. They can get away with painting a certain narrative and lying by omission, effectively just pretending certain things didn't happen because it's not convenient to their narrative. Yeah, it really sucks. Oh, they think they're slick. They think they're so clever and they're so just. But I guess they're just going off of the willful ignorance of a lot of people, where they don't want to look anything up. They don't want to, unless the information is presented to them by somebody else, they just kind of are okay with it not being something they discuss. Yeah, people are always walking around here and making noises with their feet and tripping me up with all these sounds and vibrations and movements. There was some guy, I'm forgetting his name, but you'll be able to find it if you look it up, where he put up a clip of civil rights leaders from 1963 talking about the March on Washington. So before it took place, they were planning it out and letting people know what's going to happen. Um, and it was King, it was Roy Wilkins, Farmer, Whitney Young, and I think James Foreman. And it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen posted on this website. You had these five educated black men sitting together and discussing an issue, and even and when they disagree with each other, they don't cut the other one off. They allow the other one to speak. Um, they're respectful. I mean, it looked like if you took that footage and colorized it and superimposed a green screen of heaven in the backside, like I would completely believe that those were like some kind of advanced beings from another universe. Because for some reason now, when you see these people gathered together, um, almost none of that is retained. And actually, what I did with one person was, after I played that 30-minute clip, which they said they enjoyed, I played a clip of um, Sharpton and I'm forgetting the guy's name, but he took over as I think as the leader of Core. It's Ennis something. I'm forgetting what his name is, but if you can look it up if you want to. And it was the two of them on the Morton Downey Jr. show, and it's supposed to be like a debate where they give an opening statement, speaking uninterrupted, and then they respond to each other. Sharpton gives his statement, the other person doesn't respond. Other person starts to give his statement. Sharpton says, "That's just a load of crap," and then they get into an argument where the guy pushes Sharpton down. And I was thinking to myself, it's like, isn't it sad that in a short span of 30 years, you went from a group of sophisticated, educated, respectful black men who could sit down, talk about something, have disagreements, speak with such thought out responses, to two guys sitting on some show. One of them is refusing to let the other finish his opening statements, where they get into some fight and get physical. It's just what a de-evolution. It almost makes you realize that people like King and Roy Wilkins and James Farmer and Whitney Young and A. Philip Randall, they really were too good for this world. Like, they really were like the exception to the rule of this bizarre savagery that we currently are engulfed in. Like, I I just can't imagine that people like that even existed when you see the way that they act now. Because I'm telling you, when you try to sit people down and talk about this stuff, they don't have a thought out response. I mean, I went and sat down with one guy, I told him about this shooting in Uvalde. Um, and you have some people who will say, hey, the security, referring to the officers, didn't do their due diligence and actually tried to get this guy before he came into the school. And instead of assessing, like asking me, hey, were security guards there? She goes, oh, all teachers should have guns. I'm just like, you don't even ask what happened, what were the circumstances. You just draw this blanket statement that you think is going to solve. But see, that's why I said watching that footage from 63 was so, it was almost like a completely different world where people could just sit down and you could tell all of them had thought about this. They had something to say. And now it's pathetic. It's just a bunch of individuals that give half-baked solutions and usually don't have any solution, which is why they'll try to like argue with someone that does. And it's sad that it's devolved in such a way that, like, as technology has become more proficient, the morale and character of people in general has decreased. I mean, you had the one bimbo who came on my channel and said that my views on romance were old fashioned. Um, and she couldn't explain what was wrong with wanting to get married instead of having children that are out of wedlock and that are then used to put you on child support. Couldn't articulate a rebuttal as to why I should find it appealing to have kids I either can't afford or have with a woman I'm not committed to. She couldn't explain why that's something I should be enthusiastic about doing. Because there is no appeal, and these people know it, and they play stupid, and some of them are stupid, but at their core, they know that this is not right. Just like I got into a something close to a shouting match with this one relative where they tried to say that, oh, your friend that doesn't want to know about different actors that are in all this stuff that he likes, oh, that's just his opinion. I said, I can tolerate a lot of different opinions. People don't like a movie I like, people like a movie I don't like, whatever. I don't go and mess with them. But the issue I have with this is that it is like you can always say with people they just don't know something. I've never seen an individual who purposefully tries not to know who someone is, especially someone who has impacted their life in a positive way. So I said, I'm not tolerating that. I'm gonna tell him to his face it's stupid, and I don't care if he gets mad or not. I don't like ignorance, especially when it's purposeful ignorance. And if he doesn't like it, like that stance of mine, that's too damn bad. I think something's really wrong with people. So it's just my opinion. Rebuttal is a lazy cop out for people who don't have good arguments to defend their beliefs. Yeah, he didn't have a good argument where he even conceded. I said, yeah, there is no justification for having people that did important things and you purposefully trying to not know who they are. What the hell's wrong with you? What is good about being ignorant? I've never gotten a good rebuttal for that because there is none. So I said people don't even think. They just type whatever comes to mind. But yeah, that video, man, that 1963 discussion with those five men, it brought a tear to my eye to see something that good. You really don't see anything like that anymore because I'm not joking. When every time I see more than maybe two black guys sit together and discuss something, it just seems like it always turns into some argument where someone's cutting the other person off and they get like angry over this and they try to like rants and you didn't see that in that clip. That clip went on for over for half an hour, and there was if they had disagreements, they stopped, they paused. Um, Everyone had something to say that I thought was interesting, and it's so sad that we have devolved as much as we have, and you see it in pretty much every capacity. Like even if you get people to respect each other while they have debates or discussions on something, you're still going to have to deal with this massive problem of ignorance. Where you have a lot of I said, and we mentioned them earlier in the stream, black people that have done important things throughout history that I mean, even recent history, like the last 30, 40, 50 years, where if it's not King or um, Malcolm X, you see almost no mentions whatsoever, and it's really sad, and it's kind of funny too because if there's one thing Farrakhan does correctly, and I've had my problems with him, it's that he does treat Elijah Muhammad with reverence. Like he puts his picture up, he talks about him constantly. You know, I wish more people would treat black historical figures with the same amount of care and compassion that he has for his former boss. So it's just a sad cycle. It's a sad cycle of ignorance and nastiness, a lack of candor. You can chalk it all up to that. When people say it's just my opinion, I say if you don't want to defend your stance on something, keep it to yourself. Yeah, because I certainly usually if I ask somebody who someone is or if they know who someone is and they say no, I'll then like give a brief overview of who they were. Um, if he had not mentioned the fact that he purposely tries to not know who actors are, like actual accredited, highly influential actors, I wouldn't have said anything because I always give the person the benefit of the doubt of okay, I may know who this person is, other people don't. You know, I don't know. I can't live like I don't know how. And look, I'm just going off of my perspective. I don't know how someone can just be completely fine with being ignorant of significant individuals and events throughout history. Like you have to ask yourself in these people's minds, they really believe it was just with the civil rights movement, it was just King and a bunch of random black people who, were there that did some marches and that's it. And, things just became better. It's like, that's really sad. Like that's I don't know. It's just I'm always rubbed the wrong way when I just start to like think of because remember they don't know who these different people we mentioned are. So in their minds they have like a much smaller idea of what this was. Man, ignorance is just it is all consuming, I guess. Man, a lot of black people seem to think slavery started with the Europeans, which is funny considering the biggest slave built civilization was Egypt. Well, you actually have a lot of people who think that that the Democrats have always been the anti-slavery party, that like the pro-civil rights group. So I'm not even surprised. But it's never going to not be sad to me that you have all these historical figures that get completely overshadowed and neglected and ignored. in spite of objective and accomplishments that they have. I think I'm kidding. There are a lot of people who will go to a building named after someone and like it doesn't even register to them. Hey, who was this person? And I think something's wrong with that. I think that it's very bizarre to like have places named for someone and then have no idea who that was. You know, like not even a surface level understanding of who they were. It's really sad. But again, we live in the era of purposeful ignorance and no attempt at correcting it from the people who are exhibiting it. So I guess that all makes sense. I don't know. I just think a lot of stuff isn't the way it should be. But we've discussed that before, just how messed up things are in a lot of respects. Um, like I'm still laughing at that broad. Your views are so old fashioned. That's like, and what the hell is wrong with that? I'm supposed to feel bad because I would rather be married than have a kid out of wedlock, which has a higher rate of incarceration and not completing college, and any other bad statistic you can think of. That's supposed to be something I feel ashamed of believing that parents should actually be committed to each other before they have children and plan them out. I'm supposed to feel bad for that, for believing that. Because that's why I told you that when people online type stuff, they don't think, which is why when they write these things, they press the enter key or the send key or return key. They have no way of elaborating on their position to where you could even um be able to understand what they have a problem with as far as relating to your views. Like, imagine if some woman came on here and she said, I think that both partners should pay for the first date. And then I go and say, your views are archaic to the current belief systems that I presently have. It's like, okay, what does that say to even explain what is wrong with her beliefs? Like what is wrong with that position of hers? That's why I told you that these people they type this like nebulous riddle like crap, and then we're supposed to sit here and I guess try to decipher what it is. Well, you have some weird people on this website, just in terms of some of the stuff they write and the things that they want you to do and put up with, just to like it's. I remember this one guy said, "Well, if you want people to know about these different important black people, why don't you make documentaries on?" I said, "Well, here's the thing. Just because I make a video doesn't mean people will watch it. And one of the other problems with doing that, having a little thing in my throat, is the expectation that the people who already basically, if somebody wants to learn something, they'll take it in any medium they can. So if a person really wanted to learn about a relative, they'll ask other people about that person or some other individuals that are involved with that person. They're not gonna you're not gonna get someone who can't open a book about Benjamin Mays, for example, to then watch a documentary about him that I put together on my computer because they're if they were interested, they would already know the topic. Because nothing I say in a hypothetical documentary um, is going to be something exclusive to it. It's not going to be, it could be something you saw, I read in the book, some news source. It's just sad that these people don't realize that. This guy is so YouTube brain, where they just type that old weird stuff. I always said, what is the point of speaking if people don't understand what you're saying? That's a genuine question. What is the point of talking if when you speak, people are confused? They're like, what do you mean? What are you getting at here? I don't quite understand. What's the purpose of that? If you talk and people don't know what you're referring to or what you're saying, what like you might as well be speaking in riddles. But they really enjoy that. They like leaving these cryptic comments that nobody besides them gets. And I'm personally really tired of it because it's like we're here to have a discussion. Otherwise, I would just put up an hour and a half video and talk. Um, but if people are going to be less inclined to actually address what we're saying, there's no point in even bothering to talk to them. Just like when we were talking about the woman stuff, it's like if every time you go out and ask a woman out, you get turned down, and then no one ever says, "Hey, there's something wrong with the group that we swear is have members that act differently, but they keep doing the same thing to you." And they start telling you, "Oh, you need to go to the gym to date someone that's 300 pounds, and you need to be a millionaire to date someone that lives in the box." Then there's no point. It's worthless, and it's not worth it. That's just how I view these things. Where there's a certain amount of effort that should not be required for the bare minimum. I'm telling you, the funniest thing is that like every time one of these people tries to have a romance debate, they try to say most or whatever, they never have any proof. Like I remember we had the one broad that I talked to on Discord, and she tried to say, "Yeah, most women have the same standards of attraction." I was like, "According to what?" She has no polls. She has no screenshots. Like they just make things up, and nobody thinks there's something wrong with that. If you disagree with someone, don't actually have evidence to support your claim like I do. Um, just say random stuff that is counterintuitive to what they believe and then hope that they believe it. This is why I'm refraining from dating. It's pure insanity. Well, remember, relationships are supposed to be something you do because you enjoy spending time with the other person or like their presence or company. And I don't know why you would enjoy the company of someone who only likes you because of what you own or some excessive muscles that are, so I mean, I don't understand how any of the stuff these people tell you to do is indicative of being with someone who actually likes you for who you are. It's just like when they said, raise your status. I said, well, if I had 100,000 subscribers and only then did I start seeing chicks try to speak to me, I would dislike them in general even more because it's like, yeah, now we know you're a bunch of gold diggers, a bunch of attention whores. Like there'd be no reason to even be attracted to them at that point. Remember, chicks I asked out don't have to be famous or have muscles or own an excess of wealth for me to find them attractive. and I'm supposed to be the one that's supposed to feel as if they're shallow and self-absorbed. It's like I'm not telling anyone to undergo some transformation to go on a date with me. What the hell's wrong with you people? I told you the internet lets people come on here and act like, they're just these brilliant romance philosophers who have all these amazing strategies and tricks that'll help you get what's on. And notice how they never show proof that they have a partner themselves. Hmm. I wonder why that is. Yeah, it's pure insanity. And then people look at you like you're crazy if you want to deal with it anymore. It's like, well, I've pretty much articulated why I'm sick of them. So anyone who is still confused as to why I don't want to talk to them anymore is they're playing themselves. Oh man, this guy asked me, how do I think um, the mass ignorance will be, was it solved or gotten rid of? I said, well, I mean, there's not really much you can do if people don't want to look stuff up. I mean, I guess you could do some documentaries. You could do, um, I guess if you have enough people to make it like a movie. But if people don't want to watch, they're not going to watch. And I don't know what else is really there to be said other than if there is a deliberate or indeliberate, because I don't think it's all some sinister crap. But if people don't tell someone's story, um, by and large, it stands a good chance of being forgotten. And you have a lot of people who are just they have no basic sense of history. They're completely fine with, just getting up every day and maybe going to work, going to school, and they don't really care how stuff came to be or how things turned into what they are, just whatever. Um, just to some of them, I mean, I have one person speak to, they didn't even know who Johnson was. Like, you really think that you got the voting rights just by what King waved a wand? That's why I said, like, and these aren't little kids; these are grown adults who don't know who, like, important figures of the past are. So I really don't know how else you can solve this other than saying that some people are just going to choose to not know stuff, regardless of how important it may be to me or to American history or to any objective person that says, yeah, this was actually something significant. That's just the way ignorance works. If people want to choose to not know stuff, they just don't know it. They want you to ignore your best judgment and keep doing the same thing over and over in the hopes that one person out of a million might say yes. I still have the screenshot where the crazy guy said approach 1,000 women. Like, not as a joke, like actually said approach 1,000 women. And we're supposed to find that appeal. Man, I'm so sick of that woman stuff. It's gotten to a point where every time somebody starts saying, "Oh, eventually you will find," I just laugh. Eventually is never coming. And if it appears that it is, it's a gold digger. Because, like I said, any metric of reality that you measure this stuff by, it should tell you that something is wrong with them. If you have to do all that stuff just to get a date, just to maybe get a date. Oh, ugh. Yeah, it's really sad that people are the way that they are, but I can't say I'm too surprised. If that's the case, why are there so many 40 plus single people? You still have time. You'll find someone eventually doesn't work like that. Well, it seems like one side has to do work to receive things and the other one gets a free ride. I mean, I already told the story and showed the screenshots of the lady that had her number posted on was that Reddit, and without seeing what she looked like, all they had was a number. She had 50 men try to speak to her and ask her how she was doing and all the rest of that ilk. And I was like, you can't tell me that that's a balance. You can't convince me that there is something right about a system where if you're a male, even if you're a famous male, you will not get 50 women to ask you out. But some broad who they don't even know what she looks like gets that many men to ask her out overnight or speak to her or initiate a dialogue with her. So I ask, what is the purpose of participating in a system that is designed to screw you over and to treat you like a second class citizen if you don't have a vagina? No, Akatsuki Merchant, they if you look at any of those posts on Backpage, all I would ever see is no AA, no AA, no AA, no AA, no AA. I never saw no for any other ethnic group. And in that same blog post I was reading, you had this one guy, the same guy, excuse me, that wrote that. He was like, well, people shouldn't have to have intercourse with those they don't want to. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, their job is to bang men that can pay them. You really think they would be having intercourse with most of these men if they weren't getting paid to do it? God, like, spare me the human rights feminist crap. This is their job. Imagine what would happen if I ran a company that I don't know, mowed people's lawn, and I said on my ad, no WM, which means no white men, and I'll take Hispanic people's, lawns and cut them, black people's lawns and cut them, Asian people's lawns and cut them. But I just won't cut the lawns or mow the lawns of anyone that's white. I'd be called racist in a heartbeat. But for some reason, when they do this crap to just to a group I'm part of, whatever, huh? We already explained it before. The reason they're able to get away with that is because, um, well, it's twofold. One, most clients, because most people in the US are not black, so they still, like they'll just go, okay, maybe I think that's personally screwed up, but she'll still see me, so whatever, no empathy. And also because of their gender, because chicks get defended on everything they do. So they're able to do this type of stuff, and it won't hurt their business. It won't hurt anything having to do with them. They're able to just be discriminatory, and that's all right. According to my friend, rejection builds character. What important life lesson am I getting by being denied something? Why am I expected to have this absurd superhuman level of mental endurance? Well, I told that broad, I said, if you really don't understand where a guy that gets rejected by chicks over and over again, whether he approaches them in real life or in person, whether they say they're interested in him or they don't, whether he talks to them for weeks or months or a few days, if you really don't understand why someone who keeps having that happen to them every year thinks this is always going to stay the same, you're an idiot. I don't want to speak to you anymore. Like, it's literal basic pattern recognition skills. So I said, people they don't see what they don't want to see. Any individual with eyes can figure out why I would come to that belief system. Oh, it's really sad. What did they change the picture overnight? About to say, man, these websites are run by some pretty nutty people. I've always said I just think something's wrong with the way we treat most others. Um, I really don't know what can be done about it. I guess there's just some individuals who are fine with ignorance. They expect you to have a smile on your face when you get kicked in the teeth over and over. That's my favorite thing about them. Like, you're an I word because you're speaking about women and you're angry or you sound depressed. I'm like, well, hell, what emotion are you supposed to have if you wanted something you thought was simple, like a date, and instead of just you go up to a few chicks, maybe most say no, but one says yes. It's stretched out into this years long continuous saga where you go and you talk to some woman, eventually she rejects you, and if you mention online, people attack you and blame you for everything because that's all they know how to do. Whose reaction to that would be happiness or satisfaction or enjoyment? And all the while people are getting mad at you for calling chicks demeaning terms that have to do with the way that they behave, they're completely fine with you getting called racial slurs over something that you have no control over. That's so hilarious. That like you had people who tried to take this moral high ground. They were like, the way you speak about women is so disgusting. Like, look at the type of stuff they write in my comment section. And you see no defenses, no sympathetic, oh, hey, you know what? I don't agree with them, but you don't have that's out of law. Never. So I said the internet is such a funny place because it's like you like half of it are these people who try to like be edgy because they know on the computer they can get away with anything, and then there's another half who try to have this like moral high ground, but when they're offered the opportunity to be consistent and express it whenever someone is being um sexist or they just they turn a blind eye. Think I'm kidding? I never saw one person on any of those videos where I was being called the N word actually respond back and say, "Hey, that's not right." Because they don't care. You have a part of society that feels like they can treat men any kind of way they want, um, because they know they won't be gone after for doing this type of stuff. Which is why chicks act the way that they do toward men. They talk to like 5, 10, 15, 30 of them at once, wasting everybody's time because as long as their time is being spent doing something they find fun, they're completely okay with you not getting what you want. So it's a sad state of affairs. You're supposed to feel bad for your rhetoric toward women, but oh, people are saying racist things to you. Oh, that's all right. I didn't see that comment. I didn't notice that one. It's funny how that works, huh? They're very selective with the types of things they choose to be upset over and to call to task and to confront and to speak assertively against, you know? That's really funny how you have like a group of them that never mention race at all and try to pretend that it's not a factor for these chicks. Um, that's why they're so determined to say there are 4 billion women on the planet. It's like, yeah, okay. And then you also have the ones who bring it up over and over and write nasty stuff about the way somebody looks and whatnot. Um, but it's really comedic because we've been over this before. Like the 4 billion statistic is so stupid because you have to consider that the number of chicks that are actually accessible to you is a hell of a lot smaller when you factor in how many are around the same age as yourself, how many actually will date someone of your race or will not disqualify you from being someone they could be attracted to on the basis of your race. It's just not this simple thing that these people try to make it out to be. And I think that they're incapable of realizing that because they don't know they've never actually given any real thought to this topic. Actually, your friend is right. The important lesson I learned is that I will never get in a relationship no matter what I do. You've taken the black pill. I'm so sick of that dumb term, man. Oh my god! Like that's what I thought was so funny. They try to link you with all these groups. You don't even use any of their rhetoric, and they're like, You sound like this. You sound like that." Because remember, if you're not part of the I words, you automatically have to be in their team because they own an opinion. They don't have principles. Their beliefs change based on who's the next big person to hate on. They're just hateful people who will weaponize any means to justify their hatred. It's just really sad. 'Cause I'm telling you, in real life, I don't have people that do this. Like, I don't have people who try to pretend that chicks are perfect and they never do anything screwed up or act as if you're always in the wrong no matter what happened and what occurred. It's only these computer people that do this type of stuff. I mean, yeah, but you can learn these lessons without putting yourself through constant embarrassment. You know, I think that someone can learn to like not get what they want without getting rejected over and over and over and over for years. Like I don't think that's a prerequisite to just know how to put up with this stuff. And I do think when you give someone the same negative results in excess, you can cause that person to just say to hell with it because everything is going in a way that is counterintuitive to what they would like. And if they don't think that the things that they want are being advanced or aided in any way, they're just going to say to hell with it because they're seeing that their their goals are being basically kept away from them. Because I always say, like, if chicks are the different group that people swear they are, and they're not all the same, you would have met one that would have accepted you and wanted to do the things that you want to do. Especially if you have people who try to lie to you and tell you that most women want kids. It's like I'm supposed to believe that the only way you can have one with a modern woman is by accident. The only way to appeal to modern chicks is to have a bunch of money and muscles and all this other crap that doesn't even come anywhere close to being fair because they're never asked to do this stuff to appeal to you. That's supposed to be something I want to engage with. That's why I said people don't think when they write this stuff. They just get in front of that keyboard and just start typing. man. They most certainly don't have principles. They just say whatever. I don't know. I think something's wrong with the way people choose to act. Um, because I just think something like when you do a video, you shouldn't have to hope that someone doesn't come on there and call you a racial slur. Like I don't understand why that's something you're supposed to tolerate if you just want to have a conversation about something. I really don't. That's true, but how I learned was through the constant rejection when I took the advice of these online dating guys. It still doesn't work. Well, yeah, I told you they're con artists. Like, notice how we come on here and we say, look, we're not telling you this is going to improve. We're not telling you it's going to get any better. But remember, we're not the ones saying, oh, uh, if you go to my website or if you donate to my Patreon, I'll give you all the tips and tricks on how to get a woman to like. You don't see me saying that because we're not scammers. We're not trying to make a buck off of your misery. Those dating tips aren't meant to work. They're meant to trick young insecure into giving them money. Pretty much. And it's really sad because if you get turned down over and over, there is a noticeable thing of desperation that can lead you to make decisions that otherwise might not have been something you would have done. Like, do you think if James had, let's say, I mean, even a small number, like let's say 5 chicks a year coming up and asking him out, do you think he would be on, have gone to this guy's account trying to donate to him to get the tips and tricks, or trying to like listen to him to get the tips and no, because he would, even with a small number of chicks a year saying something to him, that still is more than what most of us are getting, which is damn near nothing. I already said before, I've been said chicks should be the ones that approach, since they're so damn selective and they only like 5 out of every 1,000 guys anyway. It's about cultivating a cult of personality, not actually helping anyone. That's why those PUA types have hundreds of men who hook them, who look up to them as gods. Yeah, do this, do that, do this, do that. I said, man, to hell with you. No, I'm talking about the people who tell you get. Oh yeah, that stupid. You know what's so sad? I said before, I don't put people's pictures up ever. Um, but if I really wanted to, we could kill that. You need to have a haircut to get a date thing so easily. It wouldn't even be funny. Like if I just took pictures of people that I know in real life that have been married and showed you how long their hair was while they were married, while they were dating, that whole argument would just be like would be wiped away. Like you got Kleenex just scrubbed some crap off the wall. It wouldn't even last 5 seconds. By the way, I know someone who doesn't have their own place that still has men asking her out and trying to talk to her. So I'm sorry, but I'm not really convinced that you have to have your own place to get someone to think you're attractive. I'm still laughing at the magic cut. James, if you get this one specific hairstyle, all the chicks will be so in love with you and they'll be dripping out of their you God, they write some of the dumbest stuff, man. And it's like they really want you to believe this. Yeah, if I get this magic cut, all these chicks will like me and find me attractive. Yeah. Oh, what the hell is wrong with people? Yeah, but I feel like you should do those things for your own well-being, not because it might give you a slightly statistical advantage in finding a mate. Like I said, man, just remember, none of these chicks ever have to do this for you. When you have that triangle, you can not go to the gym, you can own nothing, and you still have men that find you attractive that want to be with you. Well, of course, I did it for my own well-being. It's just that I never yeah, because it doesn't matter. I already told you, chicks are such an extremely selective group that it really does. Like, I'm not even joking. It's like a parody every time someone says, do this, do that, and you'll meet someone. Like, oh yeah, if you go to the to uh if you do this, a woman will definitely. It's like, well, where the hell was this woman before I did this? People really do try to treat dating like a role playing game. You gotta level up first before you can date this woman who still is inclined to say no anyway. So it doesn't really matter. God, chicks are just they get everything handed to them on a silver platter, and then if you're a man, you have to have this rugged individualism. If you're a woman, you just have men asking you out, coming and trying to speak to you, whether you're online or on social media or just in real life. But then if you're a guy, you got to ask out hundreds of chicks just to get a date, and then be harassed and attacked over what you are. So I said, like, who looks at that and says that's something I want? If you get this haircut, you have a 0.001% higher chance of finding a mate. I told you about the one broad that said I should get contacts, and said that it would only increase my chances of getting a woman by 5%. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to get something that can hurt my eyes that keeps sticking in over and over again just so chicks may. And the other stupid part is, like, this is someone who's never seen me in real life. You don't know how often I wear glasses. I could wear those just to do a video and read the comment section, just drive a car and then go in the mall and not even have them on. But that's why I tell you, it's stupidity. They don't think when they recommend this stuff. They just say whatever comes out of their mind and hope it sticks. Man, the brainlessness of these people is just, it's sad. Five, by what metric? She really pulled a random dude. That's what listen. I'm just gonna put it to you like this. Debating most people on this topic, especially women, is a waste of time. Because if a woman doesn't agree with you on this topic, she will create numbers, she will fabricate information. Um, I mean, I gave you the example of the Discord one. This woman said that the majority of women have the same standards. Where the hell do you see anything to support that? And if anything, her saying that supports my belief system that talking to them is a waste of time, because if you get rejected by one of them, you're going to get the exact same result from the next 99 of them. But I'm saying they don't have any statistics. They have no screenshots to support their claims. They just make crap up and then think we're supposed to go along with it. So yes, talking to them about this is a waste of time. Don't expect them to have, like, listen, everybody always says chicks are more empathetic than men. That's a load of crap. Every time one of them doesn't agree with me on this, they sit there and they have these long ongoing debates where they can't even, like, make good arguments because they have nothing to support their claims. Like when you speak to one of them about this, you might as well be blowing out, just letting out air, because it's a waste of a breath to even conversate with them about this. They have no idea what it's like to get rejected so damn much to where you think no one will ever like you for who you are. And if you get a woman that asks you out, it's probably a gold digger or some other ulterior motive. They don't know what that's like because they have men asking them out 24/7. So yeah, they're a group that's not empathetic because they've never been through this, and they want to prolong your misery. Keep doing this thing that brings you no joy. Oh, and that person not knowing about LBJ is crazy. Yeah. But remember, that's why I told you it's ignorance because he knows who King is, right? King and Johnson had a very important relationship. It's one of the most important relationships of the 60s, actually, because King was a supporter of Johnson's proposals on the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and then an opponent of Vietnam. And actually, 5 days after Johnson announced he wasn't going to run for another term in '68, after Robert Kennedy and Eugene McCarthy were showing how much the Democratic voters were sick of him. That was when King was murdered a few days in the same week. 5 days later, it was March 31st when LBJ announced he wasn't running for another term, and it was April 4th when King was killed in Memphis. But he doesn't. I mean, yeah, the ignorance is all there. I told you, people just they don't care. They're not. They don't even have a basic grasp of history. You think I'm kidding? I could sit here and have an hour dialogue about Martin Luther King or about any of these other figures that we mentioned that have been extensively like covered in various books. These people love King and they know almost nothing about him. And that's pathetic. God, I remember that one stupid bimbo had a shirt with King on there, and I was like, you go and you ask her something about him, watch her rattle her head, have to look it up as you're talking to her because she doesn't know it. So I said, this is the era of ignorance where you can count on people to not know very important historical figures. People that I don't even have to sit here for more than maybe 30 seconds to just like quickly jot down all the stuff they did. Because they're pathetic. And that's why all these kids grow up and don't know who any of these people are because they're around a bunch of adults who don't know anything themselves. It's ignorance that breeds ignorance. You think that broad that spit out that kid that she knew she couldn't afford is going to tell her son about or daughter the importance of the different civil rights figures and the role that his or hers great grandma no, because they don't care. It's just they have a one track mind of being only concerned about themselves, and they have no sense of preservation of information or things that were significant being remembered or recalled by future generations. That's all it is. They have no higher sense of depth and purpose than working some crappy job and having children that they barely can afford or can't afford with some guy that they're not married to. That's all. That's the full extent of their lives. Oh, I mean, like Jesus Christ, Johnson was one of the most important presidents ever. 200 bills passed. And what was that, 6 years? The Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, Medicare, Medicaid, Head Start, the 911 number. I mean, like I just it's not knowing who that is, whether you like him or not, is pathetic. But I told you the other problem that we have is even if people know who someone is, they don't know anything about them. Like I remember when I was in 12th grade and I had a classmate, we had to do some kind of art project and they thought I was like making um some kind of it was like a I don't remember who it was, but they thought it was FDR. And I was just thinking in the back of my head, you stupid bimbo. If I'm making some art project of FDR, why the hell would he be standing? Because FDR was in a wheelchair after from age 39, he had polio. And sure enough, it's like even something as basic as, hey, this person couldn't walk for half of their life, or excuse me, the latter half of his life, or the was that the last 24 years. Even something as basic as he lost his ability to walk. They don't even know that. And you would think that'd be very easy to remember because there's no other president that couldn't walk besides him. Since you mentioned that woman who had a baby that doesn't about civil rights leaders, just American history is kind of scary. Yes, exactly, James. There are plenty of people who did things that were highly significant, that were recognized in their own era as being very important, that get no mention today at all. That's why I was harping on Benjamin Mays earlier. I said this is a man who was president of Morehouse for 27 years. He was Martin Luther King's mentor. They had such a father-son relationship that he and King made a pact that whoever died first would have the other one do the eulogy at their funeral, and he fulfilled that pledge by doing the eulogy at King's funeral. Um, this was the son of slaves who rose through his own intelligence to become a college president for almost 3 decades, who to this day there are pictures of him with Kennedy and Johnson and Carter at the White House because he was a highly noted public speaker. I mean, like someone like that not being known by most black people today, that's a crime. That's pathetic. But again, it's the same thing with everybody else. Look at Ralph Abernathy. That was King's best friend. And you hear almost nothing about him. Same thing with A. Philip Randolph. That's an individual who was highly influential in both the civil rights movement and the labor movement. Had his own organization, which it got merged with another one a few decades ago, but still. And you hear almost nothing about him as well. And that's why I said that it's so pathetic to me that people can just they all know who King is, but all the people that surrounded him and did things for him or with him, they treat like crap. Even the ones that are still around, like I told you, I had one person, they didn't even know who Jesse Jackson was. I said Jesse Jackson was the first black person to have a national presidential campaign and actually won multiple states. Just like I was talking with my um one of my relatives, not gonna say which one it is because I was embarrassed, but they remembered who Tom Bradley was, the mayor of Los Angeles. Actually the longest serving mayor, first black mayor as well, only black mayor. And they forgot that he ran for governor twice. And I said, "Are you crazy?" Because his run for governor is significant because that's what that caused the Bradley effect, where you have a black candidate who looks like they're winning, and then when people actually vote, they vote for the white person. And he almost won. He barely lost that election. Don't know important black figures were able to name their favorite rap. Dude, yes, that was driving me crazy. It's like some of these rappers aren't even well, I'm not even going to mention any of them by name because I don't want to get flamed for over something I don't care about. But they, this, I gave you the example of my friend. He was able to name all these different rappers, including ones he doesn't even listen to, all these different singers. But then when it's an actor, he turns a blank and feels nothing bad about that. Like, hey, this person's been in 30 movies that I've seen. Maybe I should know who they are. That's what I said. It's pathetic, man. Every time I'll never be ashamed of my ethnic group because and it won't it, and I truly say this. I won't be ashamed of my race because men like that existed. But as far as do I feel proud of black people today? A lot of times not really. Because it's like even the ones that don't do screwed up stuff, that go to school, have a job, they still don't even care to know who their own historical figures are. And again, they can name every rapper, every singer, but people that actually transform their country for the better, in some cases for literal decades, they draw a blank on. And I think that's very pathetic. I think that's very sad. I think that's very wrong. It's really and it's really sad too when you consider that this isn't even about like oh that was 30, 40, 50 because King's been dead for over 50 years and people still know who he is. I mean, hell, just to give you another example, you had Julian Bond, the NAACP leader. It's like he was around all the way up until 2015, and I still have people who go, "Who's that?" The founder of the Southern Poverty Law Center, the first African American to ever get delegates for the vice presidential nomination, and he turned it down because he was too young. It's like that's someone who mattered. Also, this critical race theory, man, I'm not even getting started on that. Well, here's my thing, okay? When I was in school, I had crappy history books. I had a history book that brought up King giving the "I Have a Dream" speech, and then it mentions 5 years later he was assassinated. Here's my problem: we're not, this is not the '60s, it's not the '70s, it's not the '80s. We have more technology at our disposal to know about what happened than at any other period in human history, literally. So when people don't know something, I think there is a fair argument to make that, like, if they don't know something, that's their fault. They choose to not look it up. Because I don't know who any of these figures are because when I was in school, they mentioned, no, I know who they are because I looked it up. I read, King's his biography. So yeah, I'm not sympathetic because there's nothing I know that anyone who doesn't just go on the computer can't also find out. Like I said, I think it's so sad because it really paints this idea that every like 50, 100 years, there's like one or two black people that matter and are remembered and culturally significant. And all these other ones, even if they do important things, they just get thrown to the wayside and disposed of like garbage. And I don't know. I just hate that, man. I'm gonna use a visual demonstration. So pretend my phone is I don't know, Frederick Douglass, King, Obama. The phone is revered, it's remembered. Even by people that don't like it, it still is acknowledged as a culturally significant thing and it remains. And in this box, it's all the other black civil rights leaders. You had Roy Wilkins, you got Ralph Abernathy, you've got Benjamin Mays, James Farmer, and we could sit here and with this box we can say, hey, you know what, it did this, it did that, it did this, it did that. We can make a very good argument for why this person or these people should be remembered just as much, if not more so, than those three or four that I just mentioned there. But because historians choose not to cover them, because people choose not to look this stuff up on their own, because figures in Hollywood and other entertainment industries choose not to make biographical works about them, That's what happens to them. They get thrown to the wayside like they didn't even exist. And that's a damn shame. And even with the figures that we remember, we still are very selective and very unknowing of a lot of things about them. And that's why I gave the example of how you have a lot of people who can only, when you mention King, the only two things they can mention, the I Have a Dream speech and the assassination. When you mention Obama, the only thing they can mention is the Affordable Care Act. They don't mention that he restored relations with Cuba, which I thought was really good. They don't mention the Iran nuclear deal, which I also thought was really good. They don't mention that he took us from 2 wars to 7, which I think was horrible, bombing, Yemen and Syria and Somalia and Libya and Pakistan. They don't mention that he originally was against gay marriage. And then when he was running for reelection and losing support among white men, he started to finally rightfully embrace LGBT people, um, which I've also been critical of as well. Because it's like, I, I don't know how people didn't see that as being politically expedient. Yeah, I just think something is wrong with that. Because there's a lot of stuff about these people that should be more discussed and talked about and known, and even if you don't like it, and you hear nothing. King had a 14-year career, and you only hear about one day of it, or I guess a few days of it, March of Washington, and the last few days as well with the assassination, and that's pathetic. That's not pathetic of him or his biographers who actually do a good job of recording most of everything. That's pathetic of the people that claim they love him so much they can't open one damn book about him. And then all the other people involved with this stuff who are around way longer and did many important things as well, they'll be lucky if they get one book written on them or two or some other single digit lesser than 5 number. And that's really sad and awful. But remember, things are this way because people have chosen for them to be that way. You know, King didn't die, and then suddenly 5 seconds later, here's this magic holiday every year in January about him. No, his wife fought for that along with various lawmakers like Ted Kennedy, and I just think it's so sad that people will sit here and they'll take an entire movement and boil it down to one person and completely ignore everybody else. No books, no discussions about him, just nothing, just total crap. Literally non-existent coverage. I think there's something wrong with that. But it makes sense because it's like if white people can't remember his various important just American figures in general, I guess it makes sense that African Americans would follow their lead and be ignorant of the various people that have done important things in in our history as well. I guess that's a good way we can be equal. We can all bask and share in ignorance. Sure, James, but notice that if you go and mention that to people, they don't remember, they don't know. You realize you can't have a discussion about that man's life even with some of his biggest fans? You realize that his biggest supporters, you couldn't sit them down and have a discussion about what was good and what was bad because they don't even know barely anything about him. And I don't get this from other people. Like there are historians. You can sit down with them and you'll find yourself having a 2 3 hour conversation about LBJ, and we'll go through his whole life and record, and like you should be able to do that with not just Obama, but any of these other historical figures that we mentioned, because they were around for very long stretches of time, and they were covered by the news, so there's records of what they did. And I just think something's wrong with the way things are, as far as like how very few people get covered the way they should be or are supposed to be. And it feels like we have a deliberate effort that if you are not a singer or some other type of celebrity, we completely ignore you and treat you like trash. I'm just tired of it. I really am. And I just want you to understand that this is something that people have chosen to create. They've chosen to ignore most influential African Americans from the early and latter 20th centuries to focus on one person or two people. And it doesn't have to be that way. Um, but you know, this is a path they've chosen to take, and a lot of people are fine with it because it's kind of like it's like a learned complacency. Like a lot of people don't have what I call intellectual curiosity. They don't look things up on their own. They don't go and research stuff. So they're if you don't present it to them, they're totally fine with just not knowing about it, with completely being ignorant to it because they don't see it as affecting their day-to-day life. But yeah, I'm fully aware with what he did in Libya, and I'm fully aware of what he did in Yemen. And what he did in Yemen, I think, is one of the worst crimes in all of humanity, to take a population of people and starve them to death because your best friend government had its representative government toppled by some rebels. I think is really evil. So, you're speaking to the choir here, but the problem is you can't even if you have someone that likes him, you can't even have a conversation about this with them without having to explain what happened. Because it's like they went to sleep while he was in office. It's really crazy. It's funny because even though Gaddafi did rule during that time, Libya was down in dumps. But when Hillary was pushing Obama to launch the attack, now Libya is in a worse state than it was back then. Well, yes, because American intervention usually doesn't improve, especially military intervention, usually doesn't benefit the countries that they claim to be fighting for. I mean, look at what we did in Iraq. You have all these drone strikes, which they've admitted kill the wrong people repeatedly. You're like, you think the people over there are going to like us when we tore up their country? Same thing with Afghanistan. But again, that's why all these people that talk about how great King was, they never mention his opposition to Vietnam. Because to take a beloved historical figure like that and associate him with an anti-war message is to validate the opinions of yours truly and other people who are opposed to military conflicts as being the righteous and morally correct position. That's really interesting. They take that specific part of his record, as much as they sit here and talk about how much they revere him, and don't mention it at all because it's not convenient to what they're trying to push today. That's hilarious. But I think I'm gonna get off of here because now I'm getting a little tired. Um, I'll be back on Monday. Thanks for showing up, James, Kotsky Merchants, and Have a good rest of your day, and I don't know what how to solve this ignorance. I guess we're just gonna have to hope that a few people remember and everybody else just stays wallowing in their pool of confusion and lack of knowledge. But it's sad that people who did important things get treated like this by their own people, by the people that they tried to improve the lives of. They get treated this way. I guess the saying is true: no good deed goes unpunished.